Let's start with the first question. As I mentioned, my first thought about you, it's Alvin Robertson is a Toronto Raptors player, and even today I showed to my daughters the Flair card with you when you are just got layup with the Toronto Raptors jersey. And how do you remember this season?
For one, it was had a couple of high points. We weren't not a very good team, but it was the inaugural season for the Toronto Raptors. And the thing was, we had maybe one of the outstanding points was we were able to win a game against the Chicago Bulls the year when they won 73 games.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other high point was playing along Damon Stoudemire, who ended up winning Rookie of the Year that year. So that was a good accomplishment. And one of the shining points was that I scored the first basket.
That's right.
In the history of the Toronto Raptors organization. So that's still in the record books.
All right. And was it difficult for you to come back to the league after your injury? How do you feel? How those games and practice was to you?
Well, after coming back from the injury, I sat out for quite a while, but my back was bad, and so really I was just starting to get my legs back under me again, and I was very excited about the fact of coming back for another year with the Raptors. I was up for a new contract, and the surprising thing to me was that while I still thought I had years to play, I was offered the head coaching, possibly the head coaching position for the Raptors at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and I turned it down to think that I still was going to play, and the job was given to one of my ex-teammates that I played college basketball with by the name of Daryl Walker.
Mm-hmm. And you played in 77 games, 69 in the starting lineup. So, but it was different role, not as a leader, but more like a mentor. And how did you handle with this task?
It's a combination. I was fortunate enough to be able to play with the next teammate of mine, who was a general manager, to play for him by the name of Isaiah Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
And Isaiah Thomas, he allowed me to be more of a vocal leader, and I didn't have to really focus as much on trying to score or doing things because it was the inaugural season. We were not going to go to the playoffs, but we were developing some of the player personnel. So I kind of had the fortune of having Damon Stoudemire to work with, and Doug Christie,
Mm-hmm.
and Tracy Murray, who I really enjoyed working with. Damon went on to have a great career. Doug Christie, during the tail end of the season, I started telling the coach that Doug Christie was ready, and he was probably going to end up playing in front of me because he was younger. He's very talented, and he played very hard at both ends of the court, and it was just his time. So I had no problem with that.
Mm-hmm. And let's come back to 1984 when you were selected with 7th overall pick by San Antonio Spurs, and it was really amazing draft. Jordan, Olajuwon, Barkley, Stockton, Willis, Jerome Kersey. And did you expect it to be drafted by Spurs and also be drafted in top 10 of this draft?
Well, it was one of the most unique experiences because throughout the years, everybody would go to New York and they would be a part of the drafting situation. However, at this time, we were competing to try to make the Olympic team for the '84 Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
So they had all the top players there trying out for the team. And at the time of the draft, we were having practice. And so we were practicing, and we were so occupied with working with Bobby Knight, he didn't allow us to have much time to be concerned with the draft or anything else. So what happened is, after practice had finished on the draft day, they were calling different players to the room for interviews. And so as they called Michael Jordan and they called Sam Perkins, I'm sitting there and I'm watching them call these people to interview them. And we turned the draft on in the locker room, and they were like on the number 12 pick or something like that. And then finally, they called me and told me come to the interview room, and I was like, well, and they said I had already been drafted at number 7, and so I wasn't aware that the Spurs had taken me. I was being told probably between 8 and 10, which was going to be the Los Angeles Clippers, actually, and I was taken 7th by the Spurs.
So you've got really busy summer in 1984. First it was draft and also this draft practice, and then the Olympic Games. And what was your role in this team? Did Bobby Knight mention that Alvin, your role in the team will be like this, or you didn't have any specific role? You were just a team and expected for playing tactics made by coach.
I think in going into the Olympics, we played several preseason games. And several times the lineups changed depending on the team that we were facing. And so, we had some great players that was there that went on to, with Chris Mullin, Leon Wood, some of the other guards that was expected to get more notoriety than I was to have gotten. And I was kind of surprised, for one, because the competition throughout the trials were just fierce and very competitive. And as I said, we changed lineups all the time. But I got to play against Michael Jordan every day, all the while, and knowing what a great player everyone was saying that he was. It was fun competing with him, and I got an opportunity to assess myself as a player. And I was starting to like the way things were coming about at the time. And, when they finally had the first games, the real games, and to be put into the starting lineup, it was just a dream come true. It was a blessing and surprise, and I really, really, really look back at those years, and they're some of the greatest times of my life.
And you probably know that once Jordan told that you were one of the toughest player he ever played against. So during the Olympic Games trainings, was it the first time when you met on the court?
No, actually, when I was at the University of Arkansas and he was at North Carolina, we played them in a basketball game, and they were rated number 1, and we were able to beat them. And that was my first time playing against him competitively on the in a game situation. But I will say that the practices during that time for the Olympics was much more enjoyable because we were going to be teammates, but you got an opportunity to see him play every day, and it was just very fun. But at that time, understand, nobody knew that he was going to become the great Michael Jordan that he ended up turning out to be. To be honest, at that time, I would have said that Sam Perkins was probably the best player on the team.
And when you played against Michael Jordan, as you said, that it wasn't time when Jordan was the same Jordan that was in the middle of the 90s, but I guess that he at this moment of his beginning of his career was alpha dog and want to dominate the other players and want to be the best in the team. And did he?
I don't think he was the great Michael Jordan exposed to the world as of yet, but he still had all of those talents and abilities. He was still a great player. It's just that he wasn't Air Jordan because he had never played a professional down yet. So they just knew him as a great, outstanding college player with a very high upside. But we all know that the player that he ended up being after the Olympics, the history has been written.
Well, the other question is about your colleague from the national team and also from Arkansas University, Joe Klein.
Yes.
And year after you, he was selected with the sixth pick, but his career wasn't the same shape as yours. And for me, as a fan, NBA fan, it's always a good question that when we see the player in the university, the draft day, first seasons, that many times somebody who was university star won't have the so flashy career than the other players. And could you tell me regarding Joe Klein, what happened? Not right team selected, no reported coach, or maybe just bad luck?
Well, I think it was a combination. Joe was a great college player because of his size, and I think we were fortunate to have a lot of recognition because we played in the same conference with Houston, who had Hakeem Olajuwon.
Mm-hmm.
So we would play them 3 or 4 times a year, and Joe would play very well against Olajuwon. And so with that going on to say, Joe was, a strong, grind, big bone center, whereas the game started to change a little bit. You had the big centers in the middle, and he had a stellar career, but he wasn't the same outstanding player from a college days as in the pros as he was in college.
Mm-hmm. And
a solid, good player. He was a good player.
And 1985-86 season, you were league leader in steals with awesome 3.7 steals per game, which is still all-time record. All NBA second team, NBA Defensive Player of the Year, Most Improved Season player, All-Star Game nominee. So many to tell about this, and you were on the top of the league. And was it the best season in your career?
I would have to say so because it was a surprise. I guess showing. I was fortunate enough that I was able to get more playing minutes because they traded prolific, great NBA player in George Iceman Gervin to allow me to have the minutes to play. And under his tutelage, I was able to see some things, and the coaching staff that came in kind of played a bit to the style of play with rotations and allowing me to freelance a little bit on defense, which enabled me to be able to come up with a lot of steals and to be able to put myself in position to have success that I had in 86 season. And that 86 season, some of the decorations that was awarded me with the steals and most improved player of the year, and then making the NBA All-Star team, and then setting the record, I would have to say that was a great year to be awarded 4 or 5 awards in one season.
When we are talking about George Iceman Gervin, how good he was?
I think that George Iceman Gervin is probably one of the most prolific scorers to ever play the game, and he played with a sense of poise that's you don't see very well now most days. But I think that Kevin Durant would put me more in the frame of mind as a George Gervin in his day, because he just did everything, and he did it so smoothly and so easy.
Mm-hmm. And also, I didn't mention regarding this 85-86 season about outstanding game against Phoenix Suns. Do you remember this game?
Yes, I remember the game only afterwards because of the game that was when I got the quadruple-double. They stopped the game and handed me the basketball and said I just completed a quadruple-double. But at that time, I didn't know the magnitude of the accomplishment, just playing. And then it wasn't until years later that it was always brought to my attention that it's only 3 guys in the history of the NBA to have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all centers. And so to be decorated as the only guard in the history of the NBA to have a quadruple-double is very, very rewarding, especially now that I'm out of the game.
And please tell me, regarding the quadruple-double, regarding statistics, nowadays statistics are an important part of the game, and a lot of players take care about this to score more points, to get triple-double and so on. And how it was in 80s? Did statistics were also very important for players, or as you said, it was only just the result of your playing?
I think it was a combination, but in the 80s, you didn't have specialization players now, whereas you have specialization players. When I say that, I mean that towards Dennis Rodman, when he became a great rebounder or a great defender, you could get compensated for just doing that role. But in the early 80s, you had to be an all-around player. Defensive players did not get paid very good money, so you had to play both ends of the court. And I think that with that being said, you know, it kind of transpired to it. Now you have defensive specialists on the team. You have rebounding specialists on the team that, you know, those guys, that's what they get paid for. Whereas in the early 80s, you know, you had to be all-around players, and if you didn't put the ball in the basket, you know, you didn't really get compensated for that. And so, you know, I had an old player on my team, a veteran by the name of Billy Knight, who was a great scorer in the ABA. And he would tell me all the time, he said, defensive players don't get paid, young fella. And so, you know, I wasn't known as an offensive, big-time offensive player, but I still average about 16 points a game, which never really gets talked about because everybody talks about the defensive side of the game.
Well, you said about the defense role of defensive player, or better, being paid for being good in defense was different in 80s than nowadays. But when I look at how important defense was in the 80s or 90s, for example, I think that when you are looking at the salaries which are in the current basketball, in current NBA for role players which focus on the defense, that probably you regret that you are not playing today.
I think anybody that's not playing today, that played in the yesteryear, are regretting not playing today because of the astronomical salaries that these guys are getting paid now. So, you know, you're looking at guys that's on the bench that don't play a lot of minutes, you know, and they're getting paid $5 to $10 million a year. So, but the game has evolved, you know. It is what it is now. You have guys that are on the roster, and you have to know that everybody on that bench, when you get an opportunity to put professional behind your name, you're good and you can play and do something very well to be on the bench of a professional basketball team. And when I look at this, when I look at the figures, and of course it doesn't show in 100%, doesn't describe in 100% who the player is, but give some overview. And I see that the steals were your main weapon. So you've got 2.9 per game during 5 seasons in San Antonio, and also 2.7 over the whole career. And would you agree? Do you agree with the statement that steals were your main weapon? Well, as I said, I was fortunate enough to be able to play for a coach at the time that our defensive schemes allowed me to double team and rotate, which enabled to put me in position to make a bunch of steals and average steals during the course of the game. But over a time period, and if you look at the NBA as it is today, you have a lot of players that are very well offensive and gifted offensive players. And they get a little notoriety. But once they show that they can play both ends of the court, their namesake takes off tremendously. You know, when LeBron or Michael Jordan started playing both ends and showed they could play defense as well and win Defensive Player of the Year as well as be a great offensive scorer, that kind of separates you from the average because, you know, when you can play both ways, and I just think that a lot of time playing defense is just hard work, guts, determination, and effort. And I think that if you can score with the basketball in your hand, you can guard with the ball not in your hand.
So I guess that Kawhi Leonard suits perfectly for your description.
Who?
Kawhi Leonard. That's he.
Oh yes. He's one of my favorite players in the league right now. I have two that I really are crazy about, and he's one. Russell Westbrook is one, and Kawhi Leonard is the second.
And why do you think San Antonio Spurs traded you for Terry Cummings?
I came in at a time, and David Robinson had sit out a year, and he had just gone through a military commitment.
Mm-hmm.
They had just lost, I think, in the Olympic Games, and so they go to find out that he was face to the basket center that liked to catch the ball on the high post quite a bit. So they needed to get a prolific scorer in the post to go alongside of him. And unfortunately, Milwaukee had a lot of success with a former player that went to the University of Arkansas by the name of Sidney Moncrief.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that I followed in the same playing style that Sidney Moncrief had. So therefore, they made the trade. You know, Sidney Moncrief was being traded and on his way out. So they brought me in to replace Sidney Moncrief, and then brought Terry Cummings in to be the low post scorer to take pressure off of David Robinson.
So I see that Arkansas University got really good defensive background, because as I remember, Sidney Moncrief also was all defensive team player. Am I right?
Correct.
And from your perspective, change the team and play for Milwaukee Bucks, was it good for your personal and professional life?
Well, I think on a professional level, I think that I could have had a lot more success now playing in San Antonio, because everybody wants to play with a great center. And with David Robinson coming in, that would have definitely been a plus in my favor. However, being traded to the Milwaukee Bucks at the time, all the power was in the East. And so it made it very tough, because, you had Boston, who was relatively tough at their game. You had the Pistons, who was knocking on the door every year. You had the Chicago Bulls, who was,
mm-hmm.
the team to beat. And so being in the East, it was just going to be a hard come by. They had several other teams. Washington was very good. Philadelphia was good. So the East had all the power at the time.
And mm-hmm.
It was just a bad time to be in the East.
And in your team played Dale Davis, Dale Ellis, Ricky Pierce, both all-star players in their prime. So what were expectations from you as a team on the really, really strong East Conference?
Well, we had a good guard combination with Ricky Pierce, myself, Jay Humphries, Dale Ellis, to where we were attacking from the Pistons standpoint, because they had smaller guards with Isaiah, Joe Dumars, and Vinnie Johnson. So we thought that we could have an advantage in posting the guards up because they were smaller, and then we had big guys who relatively shot the three ball very well with Jack Sigma, Brad Lohaus. So those guys would pack out behind the three-point line and shoot the long three ball when we post up. And it's a different strategy, because at that time, the big guys didn't like to go out on the floor to cover the three-point area.
Mm-hmm. And also, playing for Milwaukee Bucks was good for you when we are talking about attending playoffs, because it wasn't your first time. First time was with the Spurs, but when I check your statistics, I just saw that you scored more points in the playoffs. So it was 23 plus points per game. And did playoffs motivated you more?
Well, I think the focus is a little bit more during the playoffs, and we had a couple of good games, and then they would change the strategy on how they would play you, and you have to get your teammates involved. Unfortunately, I think the year in Milwaukee, the second year when we played Philadelphia, I think that was our best chance to go farther in the playoffs. And right before the playoffs started, we had two or three of our guys get hurt. Jay Humphries got hurt. Jack Sigma was hurting, so we didn't go in with a full roster, and we ended up getting swept by Philadelphia 76ers, and we had pretty much dominated them throughout the course of the year, and without our necessary players, we just didn't have enough firepower.
And in 1992, you were traded to Detroit Pistons, and when I checked the roster of Milwaukee Bucks, I thought that my first impression was that okay, they drafted Todd Day and also John Barry, so probably they send you to Detroit because they want to give them more minutes. But what was the reason for this move? How do you?
At the time, they started making trades. They traded Jay Humphrey. They traded Ricky Pierce, and they made a commitment that they were going to start over fresh. And so Mike Dunleavy, who was the head coach at the time, he pulled me to the side and he said that they were going to make trades, and he gave me 2 or 3 teams and asked which team would I prefer to go to, and give me a chance. And so the team that came about, I felt that Detroit, Isaiah Lambier reached out and called me and made me feel welcome in going to Detroit. So Detroit had just made their run, and I came at the wrong time. So I went there for the year. I thought I had a better chance with Detroit. And then I played the 1 year, and then I had a back injury. And then that following year, I was traded to Denver because they drafted Allen Houston and Lindsey Hunter, and I think they needed more guard space. And so because I was injured, it became more of a problem because they needed more room. And so I ended up being traded while I was injured to Denver. I never played in Denver.
Yes. And regarding your back injury, how difficult time it was for you?
Well, it was bad because you couldn't really determine what was the injury from, and it would just spark up at any time. So I was given the opportunity or told that I could have back surgery, which was the Joe Montana back surgery that everybody was talking about. But when I asked the doctors what would be the percentage of me being recovered from the back injury, they said, well, you have a 60% chance of everything being recovered after surgery, but you have 100% recovery if you choose not to have the surgery and just rest. So in the NBA, once you have surgery, you become damaged goods. So I did not want to have the surgery, and I thought it would be best for me to just rest and heal my back that way.
So after your back injury, you played, as I mentioned, in Toronto Raptors for 1 season. And when I look at your career, which is, if I could describe it in one word, defense, for sure. 6 times you were in all NBA all defensive teams, twice in the first team and 4 times in the second. And for sure you were one of the best defensive players in the 80s, also 4 times in the All-Star games. And what do you think about your career in NBA when you've got some reflection about the past?
I think that due to off-the-court problems, it ended a little prematurely. I think that my first year in Toronto, I was just getting my legs underneath me and looking forward to the next season when I got into some off-the-court issues that kind of derailed my career. But overall, if you put the off-the-court problems aside, I think that my career would have been recognized and given more credibility to it is than what you received or heard, because some of the things that was happening, I think the NBA kind of moved away from me because I was giving them a black eye. And so I'm just trying to put all that stuff behind me and move forward, and hopefully that I've proven to be a model citizen and I can do that.
Yeah. Previously I talked with Vernon Maxwell, and we are talking about his 3-point shoot ability. And I was really curious and also surprised when I checked that 3 seasons he led in league in 3-point made shots, and he even once wasn't selected to the 3-point contest in the All-Star game weekend. And Vernon told that, as you mentioned, this out-court issues influence on NBA, how they situated you.
Yes. Vernon, we had a young team. Vernon Maxwell and Willie Anderson and Johnny Dawkins. We were all in San Antonio at the same time. We were all young. And, we are all playing the 1, 2, and 3 spot, and it's just good to see Vernon go on to Houston and have a great season, and Willie ended up playing in San Antonio at the 2 guard, and so all 3 of us being on the same team ended up going to different teams and being able to excel at the same position, whereas we all kind of played the same position. And so it was good to see that success, and Vernon is a very good friend of mine as well. And so I'm just happy that things have worked out for him, and he's doing well as he can be.
Yes, especially that he was really fantastic player from this from the 80s and 90s as well, and he was one of the main factor for the first Houston Rockets championship. So for sure he was the guy. It was really nice to see him playing. Of course, I'm as an Orlando Magic fan, I wasn't so happy about the second title, but it's just game.
You're Orlando Magic's fan, huh?
Yes, just from the beginning.
Oh, okay.
So you probably know that this 0-4 from free throw line of Nick Anderson really hard, but life.
Yeah. I feel so bad for him. Because I wasn't for sure. He didn't recover from those free throws for a while. It took him a while. He kind of lost his confidence, and he wasn't the same player after that.
Yes, I also a couple of days ago I read part of Shaquille O'Neal book, autobiography, and he mentioned that after this game 1 he was so furious about Nick that Nick was devastated, and that after this game 1 he wasn't the same player. He was afraid of going with the layups, with shots and so on. So I think that really sad about Nick Anderson is that his whole career is defined by only this situation, because he was really good player.
Yes, he played well, and Orlando had a very good team with Nick Anderson and the 3 Dennis shooting, and Shaq, and they had a very good Scott Skiles. They had a nice team, and I'm disappointed because Nick was a very solid 2 guard. He played good for a long time, and it's sad to see that those free throws defined his career.
Yes, for sure. And Alvin, if you had a chance to arrange a meeting with yourself from 1984, and you've got this theoretical conversation, what type of advice would you give to you from the past?
From the past is save your money, save your money, invest wisely, proper diet, and focus on your trade. You understand? I would probably try to have maybe went into coaching when that opportunity presented itself, because I love the game of basketball, and the longer years that you stay away from coaching, there's always someone else coming out the following year that are applying for those jobs, and when you stay away from the game for a while, it's hard for them to remember the things that you've done in the game to get back into those type of positions.
And when you see current NBA, would it be a style that suits for Alvin Robertson more than this from 80s?
I think that in the 80s, in order to, I don't know if I could have been a great defender in this basketball league, because we had hand checking at that time as well. And it was a little bit more physical. You could bump. I don't think the game was predicated on high scoring. So with that being said, the games were a little slower paced, and the game was a lot more physical. But then you had the centers who were legitimate centers. They played in the paint. You had power forwards who were usually enforcers that played in the paint. Now you have centers that are shooting 3-point balls. You have power forwards that are stretch forwards that shoot the 3-point, and they play outside the line. So it opens the game up tremendously.
Mm-hmm. And when you are looking at current NBA, which player reminds you the most? You mentioned Kawhi Leonard and Russell Westbrook, so one of them, or maybe other player?
I like both of those players, but both of them shoot the ball a lot better than I did, right? But I like both of them because they play both ends of the court and they play extremely hard all the time. And I think that in the NBA, once you establish a strong effort, playing hard, when you start with a strong effort of competing at both ends of the court, you got half the fight done because it's all about competing. And once you learn how to compete at a high level, you're good.
Mm-hmm. And which basketball player was your favorite when you were a kid?
Well, when I was a kid, you know, everybody loved Dr. J, but my favorite player was Dennis Johnson.
It was Dennis Johnson from Seattle Supersonics time or Boston Celtics?
Yeah, Seattle Supersonics. I loved him and Gus Williams and Dennis Johnson. I love Seattle. Dennis Johnson was my favorite player.
Okay, so I guess that you were happy when they won the championship in the 70s.
Yes, I was a kid, and so I, going back there and finally getting the chance to play against him and to meet him, I came into the league and then having some success, and then he was in Boston, and playing against him in Boston, and I guess what he had read during some of the interviews, because I had won a couple of awards at that time, that he was my favorite player as a kid. I kind of took pictures with him, and it was really nice.
Okay, Alvin, that's all of my questions. I finished my list. So it was really, really good conversation. It was really nice to talk with you about the basketball and get some knowledge from the background. And I really appreciate that you spend the time with me and with our magazines. And we've got interview, really interesting interview for our readers.